Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to do my final review of the new Tamron 85mm f1.8 DI VC USD. And I've already done an episode where I took my first look at this lens and I broke down the build quality and compared it to the rest of the lenses in the SP series of prime lenses from Tamron. If you want to take a look at that episode, you can see it here, and it might answer some of your questions in regards to that. So I'm not going to spend much time on the build quality itself, other to say that Tamron continues to build very, very nice lenses in this series that have a kind of more of an advanced degree of weather sealing, and that helps to differentiate them from the competitors. And of course also the addition of vibration compensation, which is Tamron's image stabilizer system. I will say on the VC that on the positive side, the VC works very effectively at stabilizing the viewfinder and then also allowing you to really handhold images down to a very low level. In fact, I got images consistently with a lower shutter speed, anywhere down to 0.3 of a second, successfully hand-holding that, and actually got better results than what I've been able to get from the 45 VC despite the more demanding focal length. And so it certainly does its job in that regard. And so that's effective. It's also in its operation. It doesn't get in the way. It's not obtrusive when it comes on. It's not obtrusive when it goes off. That being said, I will say that I found something interesting, and that is that I noted when I first got the lens and I began to use it that when it's locking on, sometimes it gets to the destination and then there's that kind of split-second hesitation where it feels like it's fine-tuning or settling into focus. And so I thought, well, that's just the nature of the beast when it comes to this lens. But then when I was actually doing the test for hand holding the lens without the vibration compensation on, I noted that I was able to more consistently just focus and lock on without that hesitation. So I thought that was strange. So I began to purposely test back and forth, turning the VC on and trying the shot, and then turning the VC off and trying the same shots. And what I did find is that it's not to say that it's an instant cure for any of that, but I did find that I had that split-second kind of adjustment happen less often with the VC turned off. So beyond that, I will also say in regards to that the actual autofocus has been very, very pleasing with this lens. That's a big deal with any kind of large aperture prime lens, and for me particularly one that I might use for either portraits or for event type shooting. It's really, really imperative to me that I get the right shot, because some of those moments you never get again. And it doesn't matter how sharp a lens is, if it's not properly focused, all that sharpness is wasted. Very happy to report that I've had very consistent autofocus results with the 85 VC, and that's shooting it primarily at very wide apertures. And I've gotten very consistent results in a portrait session that I did. I got excellent results, and so I'm very happy with the overall autofocus performance here and have no problem recommending it in that regard. This lens, like all of the new SP series, will be compatible with Tamron's tap-in console, which much like Sigma's USB dock allows you to do some fine-tuning on autofocus at kind of specific focus lengths, firmware updates, some tweaking perhaps of the performance of the lens in various ways. How all of that will play out, I've not been able to play with that dock yet, and the word is that somewhere between the mid and latter part of May we should see the tapping console begin to come out. But that's just another extra bit of value that will extend the lifespan of this lens and perhaps allow you to get optimal results out of it. Now why don't we take a few moments and let's jump in and let's break down the image quality together and see what this lens is capable of. We're going to start by looking at a landscape type image, and this is at f1.8. And so this is to take a look at how the image quality is on kind of a bigger scale. So here on this image, this is handheld. We're going to see that one of the things that really, really stands out to me is the evenness of the image quality with this particular lens. It really is very consistent across the frame, and so you can see as we move from side to side that the lens, this is a lot of fine detail here in these needles of these evergreens, and even at f1.8 you see that the image quality between the center and the sides is very, very similar. And so that's certainly a big plus there. In this image here, it's a second one also at f1.8. And so I was using a circular polarizer for this scene. And so it's a 1/3200th of a second shutter speed. This really is really an incredible result. If you look at the contrast and the amount of detail that's here at f1.8, and once again we see that excellent consistency. Look right here at the very edges of the frame. There's so much detail there, and as we look into the distance, of course you have just a physical diminishing returns the further and further you get away from the sensor of the camera. But you can see here that even out in these islands in the middle, the contrast and the detail is really quite exquisite. And once again, that consistency right across the frame over to this edge, and we see that image quality is very good throughout. Now in these next couple of images, I want to highlight one thing. This previous image that I just showed you, it's a great result, and I believe that the VC was engaged. I do find that in some situations that shooting images side by side like this, that I'm seeing a little bit more detail and resolution when the VC is not turned on. So for example, this image, it looks good. This is at 1/500th of a second, and for whatever reason, even though I shot them within a couple of minutes of each other, the other image is at 1/250th of a second. And so this is with the VC engaged, and so it looks good. But then if you take a look at the image that didn't have the VC engaged, and we take a look in, we see that the overall resolution is even higher, and just more contrast in between these two images. And so tell you what, we'll put them side by side here and just compare these. And so on the left we have the image that had the VC engaged, on the right the image that did not have the VC engaged, I believe. Yes. And so you can see there's quite a notable difference, and so I'm not saying that this is always the case, but it could be that when you're using the lens that I've gotten, just don't get me wrong, I've gotten incredibly sharp results with the VC engaged. And so, but if you don't necessarily need the VC, you're not shooting at low shutter speeds, it might be wise to turn it off just in case, to make sure that you're getting kind of the maximum image quality that you can. And so that gives us a look at kind of resolution at medium distances to infinity, and as you can see, it's very, very consistent in the results there. Now here I wanted to give you a look first. This is stopped down to f11, so the sun's in the frame. This lens, it's not completely resistant to flaring or even some ghosting and veiling, but first of all, this is obviously a very nice sun star here, or sunburst down to f11, and you know, stop down here, obviously there's an incredible amount of contrast still in this scene, and you know, everything looks really nice and crisp. Now this here is at f1.8, and so wide open, you see it produces a different kind of result. So there's some veiling here and loss of contrast, and you can almost see a little bit of kind of prismatic effect here. That being said, the way that it renders here at f1.8 really is quite artistic, and I think that there will be some of you, particularly that shoot portraits, that will find actually a very effective use for that. But at the same time, the detail and the contrast is very good here in the image, and so overall I'm not disappointed with that result. This image here is more about just showing you how the lens does when tracking. This is a JPEG. It was shot on the Canon 80D. So I just wanted to give you a look at the fact that, and this is just one of a burst of like 30-something images. But in AF servo mode, I was not dissatisfied with the way that the lens focused. You can see here there's plenty of separation from the background. He started running way back here near the background. The tracking is moving along with him, and so a good result there, really, overall. We'll just take a look at the wide open bokeh quality here. And so, number one, you know, basically almost all lenses are going to produce some of this lemon or cat eye effect towards the edge of the frame, and this lens is not exempt from it. I do want to jump in and look at the actual bokeh circle here. The 35mm and 45mm VC lenses definitely suffer some from what you might call onion bokeh, the concentric circles. So this is really a very, very nice result here that actually looks a lot like the Zeiss Milvus 85mm f1.4 that I recently reviewed, in that it has very, very little activity within the circle, and then more importantly even is that this inner line is really not strongly pronounced at all. And so it's nice and gentle, and as we're going to see, that produces some very nice real-world results. And so here we see the background here is about 10 feet away, and then beyond from there. And you can see how it's just beautifully disappeared, just blurred away. And before the frame of focus, also very nice. And here, I think this is f2, yes. At f2, you'll see that there is a tremendous amount of sharpness here and contrast. This lens really does render very beautifully. I'm very impressed by it. Here's an image with the morning sun, and once again it shows off, all the details that we saw in kind of our bokeh shot. There is some of those lemon shapes towards the edge, but beautiful circles here they're just nice and soft, not busy, and then of course on our actual plane of focus we have nice sharpness and detail, and overall the global look of this image is really exceptional. Now, obviously, this is the kind of lens that a lot of people are going to want to use for portrait. So I've got a couple of portrait examples here, actually for different reasons. So here I wanted to show in this image just how nicely, at kind of a head and shoulders distance, how nicely everything is falling off. So on our plane of focus, we've got very nice sharpness here on the subject, and this, this left eye is our object of focus, so great resolution there. But then everywhere else, really this background is a reasonably busy one. There's a tree right here, a big pile of leftover snow that's left there from where it was plowed. There's a fence back here, and there's a tree line. But we can see that all of that has just melted away without any kind of distractions, no hard edges. And even here you see the fall off from both the forehand and then the backhand, just how beautifully those are falling away in a completely undistracting way. I also found that the lens does a good job at kind of a full length type distance. This is around 14 or 15 feet away. And so once again, we see great sharpness where it's needed. And once again, let me just double check that. This is at f2, the one before also at f2. But once again, our background is disappearing quite nicely. This is kind of that tough zone, and so right in this area is what I might call a transition zone, that some lenses really produce a lot of busyness, and this lens is doing a good job with that and giving us a nice separation of the subject from the background. And that's really what you're looking for in a portrait lens, is that nice drawing along with good sharpness on your subject. Here is a self-portrait I did in more of a studio type setting. So this is on a tripod and I'm remotely triggering the camera. And this is once again at f2, and it shows, it's kind of scary to look in this close at oneself, but all the flaws are definitely on display there. There is a tremendous amount of resolution for portrait work, but overall a nice look to the image, and once again, like falling off to the ear, one of my rather large ears here, you'll see that the fall off is very nice and smooth, and then towards the background. So an impressive result in that regard. This final image here is shot at f4, and it's more just to show the very nice color rendition that comes from the lens. I found, comparing it to some other lenses, that the color stays nice and neutral, and in many ways it kind of reminds me more of a Zeiss lens in that regard. But great detail in this. The light is low, but on our our subject, which is the island, nice detail, and then into the distance. And just beautiful color overall. This is right out of the camera here. So as you can see, the lens really is a delight in the optics department. It is incredibly sharp from wide open. It has beautiful drawing, that rare combination of great sharpness on the focal plane and then a very, very soft bokeh rendering. In fact, the bokeh from the lens actually in many ways reminds me of some of my favorite vintage lenses, but without kind of that haziness that's often on the subject. This is a much, much, much sharper lens. And in fact, when it comes to the resolution is vying with that of the Zeiss Otis, which is incredible. And the Zeiss Otis is a little sharper in the middle, but at the edges of the frame, the Tamron is actually a hair sharper. And so that's an incredible performance from a lens that costs something like a sixth of the price of the Zeiss lens. And so certainly the image quality is something that gives you a whole lot of value. But back to that VC issue. As you saw, In some cases, you may get a better performance optically if you're shooting at higher shutter speeds by turning the VC off. I'm certainly happy for the inclusion of VC, because how much better to have that as an option for those times that you might want to drag the shutter or you need that stability that it brings. And so great to keep it on. But I might recommend, if you buy the lens, that when you're shooting at shutter speeds that don't really need VC, that maybe you shut it off, because then you might get the best results out of the lens. And if there's kind of one mark against this lens that I would say, it has to be that issue right there. And but beyond that, the optics really are incredible on the lens, and the overall performance of it is it's been very pleasing to me. This is a lens that I've really enjoyed using, and in fact, I like it enough that I hope to continue to be able to use at least a copy of this lens in the future. I'm very strongly leaning towards adding it to my own kit. It really just does such a beautiful job and is an automatic for shooting portraits. And one thing I will note is that the one thing that causes people some pause when they look at a lens like this with a maximum aperture of f1.8, they wonder, is f1.8 going to be enough? Well, the good news is because of the nature of an 85mm focal length, in a lot of ways having an f1.8 aperture is going to affect you less than what it does with a wider angle lens. Already there is a tremendously shallow depth of field, even at f1.8, at many distances with this lens. And I found that it still has great separation, even for shooting full body portraits. And so I don't think that that's really going to be an issue. And of course, the inclusion of the vibration compensation means that in the settings where you're dealing with lower light, that it can help in that regard. Just know that, like any other lens, that if your subject is moving, it doesn't matter how stable the VC holds the lens for your actual shot. If the subject's moving, there still is the potential for having motion blur. And so you may need to keep that shutter speed up anyway to account for that. When people hear an 85mm f1.8, and if they're in the Canon sphere, they will think, okay, well, this is a similar lens to the Canon 85mm f1.8. So why is it so expensive? At $749, the Tamron is not quite twice as much, but it's within the ballpark. And so some people will be turned off by that. Note, however, that this is a radically different lens than Canon's 85mm f1.8. This is really more of a professional grade lens with a professional grade build quality, metal construction, weather sealing, plus it has the addition of the stabilizer, the vibration compensation, and optically it destroys the Canon. And so you Nikon shooters, the 85mm f1.8G lens is a more competent lens than the Canon. But at the same time, it's not at the level at the overall image quality, and this lens has very low chromatic aberrations. It has very few optical flaws at all, and so it certainly surpasses the performance of the Nikon as well. So beyond that, you either have the very expensive variations, various options from Canon or Nikon that are the f1.4, and then of course the nearest competitor really would be the Sigma 85mm f1.4. This lens is $749. The current price of the Sigma 85EX lens is $969. So I hope this helps you out in your buying decision for this lens. I invite you to take a look at my website, and you can see a linkage down below to my full written review of this lens. Also an image gallery with many, many more samples. You're going to want to take a look at that. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. Have a great day.